Broadcasting from South London, this is episode 5 of TFix Podcast called Electronic Equipment We Repair and Most Common Problems. I'm Ted, the owner of TFix. In front of me is Anthony, my colleague and supervisor of our repairs department.
How you doing?
During the TFix Podcast in general, broadcast in general, we usually discuss highs and lows of tech recycling life. And today we're going to talk about electronic equipment we repair and what are the most common issues we see, how we fix them, and if there is anything else you can actually do to prevent these issues from happening. So let's talk about what kind of equipment we repair.
Yeah, so most of right now with the current coronavirus situation, we are repairing almost exclusively games consoles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like insane amount of them.
That's literally I would say 95% of what we're doing right now are video game consoles.
Are the game consoles? Yeah, there's an odd computer and a drone, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But people are just stuck at home with not a great deal to do. So that sort of explains the demand that we were talking about an episode or two ago as well. But on top of that as well, we do computer repairs. We usually do a lot of drone repairs as well. And see, that also ties into the situation. No one is out flying their drones.
Yeah, you can't actually get out and fly your drone, so you can't crash it. Hence, we can't fix it.
Exactly that. Yeah, so, most of the issues we have with drones are normally related to a crash. But, say, right now, it's just not something that is coming in all that often right now.
Yeah, in regards to game consoles, PlayStation 4s, Xbox Ones, and Nintendo Switches, I would say.
Yes,
these are the most common ones.
Yes, so all the sort of current generation consoles, PlayStation 4 the most. Although I think that is more to do with the fact that that there's a bigger install base, more people own a PlayStation 4.
Been like the amount of units sold over the years. Probably PlayStation is leading that by quite a large amount over the Xbox, and still Nintendo Switch.
Yes.
However, I think Nintendo Switch
is catching up.
It definitely exceeded the amount of sales of Xbox One.
Yeah, that happened. That happened pretty quickly.
That's a much more popular game console, and it's an insanely good game console. It's my favorite one, probably.
I love it. It's an excellent console. The Xbox has had a rough time this generation. Like, there's still plenty of Xboxes about, but there are far less than.
But looking from engineering perspective, Xbox One, it's much more superior game console to PlayStation. It's so well built, and the hardware, like the way the components are positioned, and the quality of the actual components, and the quality of PCB and the assembly, it's quite a lot better than PlayStation.
It is.
And the way everything's been put together as well.
If you're looking at the sort of specifications aside and purely looking at that build, the build quality, and the way they've kind of laid it all out, it's fantastic.
It's fantastic. It's modular. It's very modular. You can pick up components like different power supply, hard drive, disk drive unit, and just replace it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's like if there's a fault with it's easy to replace a part.
It's easy to replace them, right? Yeah, it's easy to take apart as well.
Yeah.
But as the PlayStation owners would say, it doesn't have the soul.
It
doesn't have the bloody soul of PlayStation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's coming from Japan. Japan is the capital of gaming.
And
the Asian gaming market is such a big thing.
It's enormous, and that's also why the Nintendo Switch has just skyrocketed. Like having a console that just fits into a life which is a lot of people do commute. More people do commute.
Yeah.
And they do enjoy sort of playing. The phone game market is a good way to base it. Mobile games in the Asian markets are up here somewhere.
Exactly, yeah. But Nintendo Switch, it fits into your life, it fits into your pocket, and it has the ergonomics of the actual game console. So the phone, touchscreen could be quite fiddly from time to time, and you can't play like good platform games on it. No way.
It's just not good enough.
Yeah, it's not good enough. The Switch, it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. It's got all the trimmings of a normal games console.
Yeah.
Down to your thumbsticks, which are super useful for things like that. It's an excellent piece of kit.
Well, we'll talk about thumbsticks in a minute. Yeah.
Yes, we will. So,
all right. So, what are the most common issues that we experience and we could say that are reoccurring on the current electronics that we repair?
well, I think without a doubt, and by some margin, it's the PlayStation 4 HDMI port.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
HDMI port, the HDMI port plague. Yep. It's been plaguing PlayStation since the actual release.
Yes.
But you never know. Like every single time new equipment comes out, there's some kind of underlying issue. Xbox 360 has been released. It's been plagued with the overheating issues and
The Red Ring of Death.
The Red Ring of Death. Yeah. PlayStation 4, Yellow Light of Death. Also,
And you've got the blue light issues as well. There's all the light issues with the PlayStation.
all the light issues. Yeah, it's just an indication. Yeah.
But the HDMI port, more than anything.
More than anything, yeah. Because it's a physical part. It's a physical part that you have to use from time to time. And it's a very weak one.
Yeah.
They did make some improvements in later generation game consoles, like PlayStation 4, the C chassis, and the later ones.
And the Slim and
the Slim, yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too. I mean, I think most people still own the standard type of PlayStation 4.
Yeah, it's the cheapest one.
It's certainly the cheapest one, and for a while it was the only one.
Yeah.
So I mean that might contribute to it, but yeah, it's a big issue with the PlayStation 4s.
And technically speaking, PlayStation 4 is still far superior to PlayStation 4 Slim from the engineering perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, the way what happened during the design of PlayStation 4 Slim was the engineer drunk or something?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
50 fucking different screws and an insane amount of like internal logistics and bending and all that stuff. It's just not very serviceable.
Because just a moment ago we were talking about how the Xbox One is modular. When you open up an Xbox One, there is the board that makes everything happen, and then and then there's 4 sections on top. Here's your disk drive. Here's the hard drive. This is where the power goes. On the PlayStation, it's very different.
You want to change a disk drive, you have to take everything apart.
Absolutely,
basically fucking everything apart. Yeah,
every little piece has to be taken apart, and the Slim is even worse.
Yep, and the Pro, they didn't make it better. It's exactly the same. It's even worse. Yeah, so you want to change the drive, you have to literally take it completely apart. So if your disk doesn't read any games and you need to change the laser,
yeah, you're taking the whole thing apart. Yeah, you have to sort everything out. But say even with that, the HDMI port also is no exception to those rules. It's still taking everything down to motherboard level, which is as stripped down as you can get, because that part isn't merely something you just clip on or anything like that. It has to be desoldered from the board.
Let's talk about, like, a lot of people think that it should be an easy job to get it done.
It's not.
What you need skills first, how to do it. You need at least 2 different soldering irons. One would be for micro soldering, one for macro soldering.
So micro soldering is when you're soldering under a microscope. If you have not got a microscope, you're not going to do that repair.
Yeah, you can't see these pins with your naked eye. No way, you can't accomplish that. No.
And if you were to attempt it and do it incorrectly, then you can damage the port. Worst case scenario, you damage the motherboard itself.
Yeah.
And that can lead to a totally broken console.
Yeah, and you also need flux.
Yes, of course.
Flux is quite, you need some good ventilation. You need 2 different types of solder, one for removal and one for the actual soldering. You need the soldering wick.
Yeah, even getting the old port out can be an issue without it will be an issue without the right tools. So it's one thing to say that oh, you just solder a new HDMI port on, don't you? You really don't. Not with a PlayStation 4. There's a lot that goes into it.
Exactly. And the simple soldering irons that you can get at Argos or B&Q, they won't do it. No
It's
way.
not the same.
No.
Absolutely not. I mean,
No.
they're fine for what they are, but for doing work like this, you need a whole different set of kit.
Yeah, so we get a bit offended when people come over and say, oh, it's just a soldering, it's just a port that needs to be replaced. I could do it myself if I would have the right tools.
It's like,
That's the phrase that gets on my nerves constantly. I could do it myself if I would have the right tools.
Yeah, it's like, okay, there you go.
There you go.
3 hours later, you won't have it done.
Get your tools. You're only going to cost you a couple grand.
Yeah, exactly that.
All right. So next common issue.
Well, I say with the HDMI one, a lot of times it gets damaged. Sometimes with things that are beyond your control. But the next most common issue would be consoles overheating.
Yeah,
I would say, and you can at least have some measures in place to prevent that yourself.
Oh yeah. We'll talk about how to prevent it. But I mean, when in regards to overheating, well, imagine your game console is the same as any kind of computer. It has the same components. It has a processor which heats up, needs to be cooled down, and it's cooled down by the airflow, which is pushed by a fan inside of your game console. And if any of that path is restricted for that airflow to flow easily, your game console overheats. There's also a thermal compound which transfers the heat from the actual processor to the heatsink, which is cooled by an airflow pushed by a fan through. So if that thermal compound is not efficient enough, it doesn't transfer heat from the processor to the heatsink, hence it overheats. And that thermal compound, it has an expiry date. It's good for about a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years, and then it starts to harden up and it doesn't transfer the heat as efficiently as it's supposed to.
Yeah, it just doesn't do the job anymore.
Yeah. So that's essentially why all the game consoles are overheating. Yeah. So either by restricted airflow or just natural degradation of the thermal compound.
And I think sometimes it's an issue caused by the manufacturers wanting to make a slightly sleeker design. And that's why,
yeah, definitely.
I mean, your PC will usually have a lot of space in it and great big roaring fans if you have a
multiple one.
Yes, if you have a gaming
rig,
a gaming rig set up, you're going to have big loud fans. For a lot of people, that would just be something that they don't want on their games console because it's more of a multimedia platform, isn't it? If you're not playing games on it, you've got the options for your Netflix, your YouTube, Amazon Prime movies, things like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of people use it as an all-purpose box, and they don't want that thing to be. You don't want to hear the
Sounding like
fan.
a Hoover, yeah.
Exactly.
But it does sound like a Hoover when it's overheating.
Yes, it does.
We get like fault description. Sounds like a jet.
Yeah, it's going to take off.
Yeah,
it's always going to take off.
Sounds like a Hoover, yeah.
Yeah.
So we get that. But so essentially all the game consoles are overheating because of the restricted airflow, which is usually caused by dust and thermal components degrading over time, yeah.
Would you say there's any consoles in particular that happens the most to?
What would you say? A PlayStation?
I still reckon PlayStation. Yeah,
But it could be that we are biased because we get so many of them.
Yeah, you're probably right there. I mean,
if we're looking at percentages, they're probably around the same.
They're probably around the same. In the Nintendo Switch, not so much. I've not seen too many.
It's not running that hot. It doesn't need to push as much of like intense graphics applications as PlayStation and Xbox. Because we were talking earlier in the morning, like Nintendo always comes up as a crafty little beast.
Very clever.
They could always come out with crafty little like game-changing game consoles like Game Boy and Nintendo Wii and 3DS with their 3D graphics, and now Nintendo Switch. The PlayStation and the Xbox, they just keep pumping the more powerful gaming consoles.
Yeah.
But they kind of staying in the same league. Nintendo Switch is completely out of like
every time.
Every time they release something, it's like what?
Sometimes they flop. I mean, the Wii U. We don't need to talk
about
that.
Wii U. Yeah, we don't need to talk about that.
But they struck gold with the
made
Wii.
up with
And they
bloody
the
switch, yeah, easily.
struggle with that. It's excellent.
Yeah.
So what else do we tend to do a lot of?
Drones?
Let's talk about drones. So I know it's not something that's happening right this moment, but yes, let's talk about drones. So actually, most of our podcasts, we have been mostly centralized around games consoles because of the current situation. But
so we try to stay current, but we do repair drones.
We do repair drones, and we repair a lot of them, usually.
Usually a lot of them, yeah.
To be honest, with the weather improving, this would be the sort of season we'd be starting to see more drones.
We would have a lot of them if people wouldn't be locked down, yeah. So as soon as the lockdown finishes, hopefully in some foreseeable future, we'll see people coming out and flying their drones,
Flying drones. And, we have a lot of people that use their drones for work of some sort as well.
Yeah, cinematography.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the applications for them, even if you're trying to just film a trailer for something or trying to advertise something, having that aerial shot from a drone, you sometimes can't match that. It looks fantastic.
It looks bloody fantastic, yeah. So the most common issue when it comes to drone repairs is something to do with the camera.
Yes.
Because the camera is the most expensive part of your drone, and when it crashes, it kind of hangs below your drone, and that takes the most of impact.
Yes.
And there is an underlying issue when it comes to DJI Mavic Pro drones. They have a weak spot, which is called flex cable. That flex cable is located on the external parts of the camera, and when you crash, it's extremely fragile and it breaks.
It will almost always take the brunt of the damage. A lot of our drone repairs are
for
the flex cable
replacement. Yeah.
An interesting thing about the flex cable repair as well, it's not always as immediately obvious what the issue is. It doesn't have to sever completely, and it can cause a myriad of faults. It can cause several different things to happen. I mean, they're all going to be camera related, but so if you have your PlayStation and the picture disappears, it's probably an HDMI port. But there can be a whole host of issues which will all tie into the flex cable.
Yeah. So then I'm basically explaining. There are two cables connecting the camera to the drone itself. One's called video signal cable, and the other one flex cable. So video signal cable is responsible for actually transmitting video feed and the information, video and audio, just the video feed from the camera to the drone itself, while the flex cable is responsible for controlling the camera and making sure that it's stable and getting all that information from all the sensors and keeping with the horizon and stuff. So if you see any kind of malfunctions in regards to camera stability, vibration, or camera doing little dances or whatever, that most likely do with the flex cable. And we've seen the occasions of flex cable being damaged just from drone being transported.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have. I mean,
so there's nothing. Customer goes like, I haven't crashed it. Nothing else. Nothing happened, and it just simply stopped working. It's that fragile.
It's that fragile. Even if you were driving down a bumpy road, it's in a case and it's just getting bumped lightly.
Especially if it's not secured with the special locks.
Yes. And we do have plenty of drones that come in minus those locks. So it's a fair assumption that maybe not everyone uses them or they misplace them, and ultimately it's just a small piece of plastic.
And not many people are aware of it, like having a chance to be damaged whilst being in transit without the actual lock.
And I mean, we've talked about how fragile it is, but that's just the way it is with that part, isn't it?
Yeah.
Until
there's no way to improve it.
There's no way to improve it unless someone innovates from the ground up. I think that's going to continue to be an issue with drones even going forward as well.
Yeah, but DJI did release the next version of the actual drone, DJI Mavic 2 Pro, completely eliminated the issue. The gimbal is as robust as ever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Any more issues?
Well, we've been singing the Nintendo Switch's praise.
Oh yeah,
this episode.
So let's talk about
so let's get the dirt on the Nintendo Switch.
Let's get the cons in, yeah.
So first and foremost with that one would be the charging port itself.
Yeah.
And this is one I'm looking forward to talking about in the when we sort of go over prevention a bit later.
Yeah.
But yes, the USB port at the bottom of the console where you charge it and where you put it in the dock, very susceptible to damage.
Yeah. I don't, to be honest, from technical perspective, I don't think there's a problem with the actual port, but the way it is being used, the way it's being designed to be used, and the main issue that it's at the bottom.
Yes.
They could have made it at the top.
They could have made it at the top.
Yeah, I don't see why would it. It's so much easier to make it at the top. Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, even early on, they were slightly ridiculed about that. Why is it at the bottom? That's a dumb idea. Come on.
And when you get your Nintendo Switch, you charge it. Obviously, you play it if you're at home on a cable, and you can't help but suspend your Nintendo Switch on that cable. Yeah, and that's what damages the actual.
So you'll be holding the device, and you'll have your arms about here, and the cable will be. So probably not that easy for you guys to see, but if you're playing in a relaxed position with your Nintendo Switch console, it might very well be leaning on the cable while you're doing it. It sounds dumb until you've used one, but that's where it is. The Nintendo Switch
probably is,
yeah. So the Nintendo Switch also has a kickstand, so you can play it portably with the screen, and it stands up on its own, which is a great design. You can't do that when you're charging it, though.
Exactly, yeah. And most of the time, the battery lasts for about, a couple of hours?
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad for a portable.
It's not bad for a portable, yeah, but most likely, most of the time, you're going to be using it whilst charging. And you can't use the kickstand.
Yeah, you can't use the kickstand.
You can't use the kickstand.
It's one or the other.
So, USB-C charging port on Nintendo Switch. Again, a weak spot. I would say quite a hard repair.
It's actually a surprisingly hard repair. It's again stripping down the console to its motherboard component level, so as stripped down as you can get.
And for that, soldering iron won't help. You need a special reworkstation.
Yeah, and we've seen consoles come in where people have tried this one themselves. You can't unless you've got the equipment, and the equipment's upwards of a couple of grand. You're not going to do this one properly.
It's upwards on I think our one is about 25 grand.
25 grand.
Yeah. So you can't do it yourself, and because it's a special SMD component, the surface mount device component located on the PCB. You need a desoldering station and soldering station to get it done. It's so much harder than PlayStation.
It is. It is, and you still got you got to have to check everything under a microscope and know what you're looking for at that point. As well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is an interesting repair because a lot of the time, if your device isn't charging, you do what everyone does. You push it in harder.
Yep.
You push it in harder. You give it a twist. You give it a shake. See if you can get it to work. You're damaging it and you're making it worse every time you do that. And I know how frustrating it is. Everyone's done it with their mobile phone. Oh, it's got dust in it. I'll just give it a wiggle. You'll make it so much worse.
You make it so much worse, yeah. And we need to talk about if you damage the port or if you put an incorrect charger in and you short the pins or something, there are relative components on the PCB that can get damaged and need to be replaced. And these components are a nightmare to replace.
Yes.
They take a lot of time. They take a lot of skill.
And so we've been talking about difficult repairs, and we're not exaggerating.
We're not exaggerating. No.
And the components that you can damage from messing around with a charge port on the Nintendo Switch are far harder to fix than that.
Yeah.
Far harder to fix than that. The USB port definitely is a major issue. But you can do so much more damage by not just sending it in or trying to get it fixed.
Yeah.
At that point.
So let's talk about the widely documented Joy-Con issue.
Yes.
On the internet.
So this is an interesting one. I've only seen this happen a couple of times with game console manufacturers.
Yeah.
Where they've admitted a fault.
Well, Nintendo, they're quite an awesome company, so they always do everything, whatever it takes.
Yes.
to provide good customer service. I think it comes from culture as well. Yeah,
I think you're right. But the thumbsticks on the Joy-Cons, so the Nintendo Switch controllers, the ones that come with the console specifically, they have the infamous drifting issue.
Yeah.
And that's where they will control a little bit on their own. They'll slightly off center on their own, just through general use. And that will cause missed inputs, extra inputs when you're playing games, which is the most frustrating thing on the planet, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, it's such a wild issue. Like, we have our own gaming console, and we have to replace at least 3 or 4 times the drifting thumbsticks.
Yeah, I mean, we use our consoles here for testing, but even just through that testing, and we look after our equipment, the thumbsticks just go.
So what happens? They wear out inside due to plastic materials wearing inside of the actual thumbstick and have to be replaced. Well, good news is that it's an easily replaceable part, no soldering required. So the customer they could probably replace it themselves if they have the right tools and if they good with micro stuff.
Possibly. I don't even think it would be the switching of the stick itself that would be the issue. I think it would be making sure nothing else is damaged in the process.
Yeah, seen that happen, yeah.
Yeah, there's an awful lot. It's very fiddly. Yeah, there's an awful lot going on. There's
little flex cables that need to be detached and all that stuff. All right, so I think these are the most common and most popular issues out of the hundreds of issues that we've seen and we could identify. Yes. So let's talk about how to prevent all these issues and what to do in order not to fork out the money to get them fixed.
Yeah, just try and stop the issues happening before they happen. So I guess we can go through it in order, really. So we've already talked about the HDMI port issue. So how to sort of prevent that?
Well, there's no way to prevent it from actually breaking, but you can be as gentle as you can with it and make sure you don't wiggle it around and you don't move it. What you have to understand that it's not an HDMI port in your TV. It has a design flaw and you have to be with it as gentle as possible. So you cannot treat it as the same port as on your TV or something. You have to be extremely careful.
Yes, and I mean, I understand where the issues may happen if it's in a tight space already and you're trying to sort of thread the needle without looking and trying to get the cable into the port. Maybe you can't see, but if you can, I guess try and prevent doing that. Try and make sure you're looking at what you're doing. Try and put it in gently, and if it's not going in, don't try and force it. Just take it out and try again, really.
And don't drop your game console with your HDMI cable still connected.
Yeah, that's the big one.
We've seen that quite a few times,
Plenty of times. Just some care and attention when you're moving consoles if you have to move the device.
Exactly, if you essentially don't move it. Yeah. Overheating issues. Can we prevent them from happening?
We can at least slow it happening. So normally the consoles overheat because they just end up getting full of dust, and if you just clean the console every now and then, that will always help. But also generally keeping it somewhere where there's good airflow. I know it might look nice if it's in a small gap in the shelf, but if it's got no air there, it's going to overheat quicker than if it had some space around it.
Yeah, obviously air circulation is quite important. So if you leave sufficient 2-3 inches gaps around your game console for it to breathe, it will lessen the chance of it overheating.
Yes, and I suppose generally, I know sometimes you're a bit stuck as to where you can and can't keep your console.
Yeah.
But if you can just keep it in an environment that hopefully isn't all that dusty, I know that sounds daft, but that will certainly help. Yeah,
that will help. Yeah, and get it serviced.
Yes.
Every couple of years, maybe get it serviced. Change that thermal paste, and it should be running completely fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's not always something you would think immediately. Oh, my console needs is probably overheating, so it needs servicing for that. But the telltale signs for that are the console just being very loud, being very noisy. You can prevent worse things happening than an overheating issue if you do send it in, or if you do at least get it sort of checked out.
So,
At that issue at that point.
Yeah, the thermal components inside, they do have an expiry date. And the manufacturers, they manufacture a device for it to be used for about 3 years, and then they expect you to upgrade that device. So you have to remember, if you have a game console for 5 years, it's way past that point, and you need to start looking after it. Yeah. Drones and Mavic Pro flex cable.
Yes, so best way to prevent the flex cable breaking is do not crash your drone.
Do not crash your drone, yeah. How to not crash your drone? Learn how to fly before you actually fly. Watch plenty of YouTube videos how to fly your drone. Make sure you read through the manual. Make sure you're in completely open space.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an amateur pilot as well, if you try and test it in a field, don't try any sort of crazy stunts with it as soon as you get it. At some point, I'm sure you'll get there, but test somewhere open where that's not going to be an issue, and make sure you are just confident flying your drone. Also, with I know we've said about the flex cable being just generally quite a fragile piece because that is what it is. Make sure you use the lock.
The gimbal lock, the gimbal
lock.
dome. Yeah,
it's all super important, and the gimbal lock, it doesn't even look like much. It does just look like a little piece of semi-translucent plastic, but it is so important.
It's so important, yeah.
Since we've already discussed about how if you bump it hard enough, you can damage it, and because of that component and what it is, it's not the cheapest thing to replace. So do all you can to kind of look after that thing.
Yeah, so that little thing, it prevents your camera from wiggling when you kind of like bump around your drone. So especially when it's in transit, if you're not gonna have it in, your camera bumps around, and that's when flex cable gets damaged.
Yeah. So unless you want your drone to record a shaky cam horror movie, then yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Make sure the flex cable's okay.
Yeah. Nintendo Switch USB-C port.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. In terms of preventing it, sometimes, I mean, I know a lot of kids have Nintendo Switches, and it's quite hard to kind of monitor what they're doing with it all the time. But the real issue is just trying to make sure that there's no undue force on that part in the first place. I know it's quite easy to just use the cable as a stand, as a rest. You're going to damage the port eventually. That's not what it's designed.
And it's kind of like when I play it, or when I see my son playing, hands get tired, and you can't help yourself but just to suspend your Nintendo Switch a little bit on that cable connected to your game console. So if you can avoid doing that, most likely will obviously have a low probability of damage to USB-C charging port.
Yeah, and I suppose just one more thing with that as well. If it is starting to go, if you're finding that you're having to get the cable in the right place or get the console in the right place on the dock, that's the time to go and get it fixed. Because if you don't and you start forcing the cable in, you will damage something else, and you will make it worse. So if that starts to happen, you need to look for servicing quite immediately.
Yeah, what we need to add, if the port's damaged, if the port's loose, you run the risk of shorting the internal pins, which damages further components on the actual PCB, and they're quite a bit more expensive to replace.
Yeah, and the very worst case scenario will be a motherboard replacement, and just right now with the current situation, they're 300.
I think they've gone down maybe from 600 down to 400.
400,
yeah, but they're still ridiculously expensive.
It's a lot, but you can avoid that by just keeping an eye on the charge port.
Yeah, and the last one we're talking about is the Joy-Cons. Can't really do much about that except like keep your game console in a drawer and don't play it.
That's it. Yeah, the only way you can prevent that is not playing it, which of course we're not expecting you to do. So just with the Joy-Cons, just expect it to happen eventually.
Yeah.
One thing that is interesting with this repair though is Nintendo themselves have acknowledged that it is an issue.
Yeah.
And they do have steps in place to get your Joy-Con thumbsticks, your Joy-Cons fixed if they're drifting.
If they're drifting, yeah. So reach out to them, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe reach out to Nintendo, but I don't think that offer lasts forever. So I think if your Switch is a couple of years old, they might very well turn around and say no. But
yeah, because by law they only oblige to give you a 1 year warranty.
That's it.
But Nintendo's pretty awesome company, so reach out to them and see what they say.
Yeah, so I know that this is kind of goodwill warranty, if you like, isn't it, for this one?
Yeah, might not last for a long time as well, yeah. But if you don't want to wait for Nintendo, if you don't want to buy new Joy-Cons, you can get them fixed at TFix. Yeah, just send it over. We usually run a pretty good service time when it comes to Joy-Con replacements.
I mean, the general consensus is, Nintendo are awesome. The fact they're even doing that for the consoles, but expect a lead time associated with that as well. And
exactly, yeah.
You know, now more than ever, it's going to take a little while.
All right, I think that's it. We covered everything. Yeah, what we talked about is what kind of equipment we repair. We identified all the most common issues of the equipment failures. And we talked about what would be our suggestions on how to prevent it.
Yeah, so if there's any preventative measures, we've gone through all that.
Yeah, that's what we would suggest. So thanks for listening to TFix Podcast with Tad and Anthony. If you like it, please share, like, subscribe to help us with the algorithms as usual. And join us next time to hear more about the highs and lows of tech recycling life.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.